I have the distinct honor and privilege of introducing our speaker for today, General Joe Ramirez. General Ramirez, I'm not going to talk about his long and distinguished military career because you can read it all in the program. But I want to tell you briefly about some of the remarkable things that General Ramirez has done at Texas A&M since he came back to A&M on November the 1st, 2010, to take over a Corps of Cadets that had shrunk to 1,800 cadets. He was charged at the time by Dr. Lofton, our president, to grow the Corps of Cadets to 2,600 by the year 2020. I want to tell you that today there are nearly 2,500 already in the Corps of Cadets, and he's on track to meet that goal of 2,600 5 years early this next fall. He's an inspiring leader who loves young people. He loves achievement. He especially loves Eagle Scouts and actively recruits Eagles to join the Corps of Cadets. There's a brief reason for that. He says that those guys that are Eagles or Gold Star Girl Scouts don't quit. They've had over a 95% retention rate through 4 years for Eagle Scouts. Is it any wonder that they're coveted so much? He, in addition to all of his work at A&M, serves on the board of directors of the Sam Houston Council of Boy Scouts in Houston, which includes the Bryan College Station area. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce at this time Brigadier General Joe Ramirez.
Well, howdy. For those of you that aren't Aggies, you're just going to have to learn to deal with it, because that's how we say hello in Aggie land. I got to tell you, quite honestly, when they told me I was coming to speak at a Good Scout lunch, I was thinking a side room of the Holiday Inn with 30 or 40 people. I wish somebody had forewarned me, I would have shaved a little closer. I am honored to be here with you today for a lot of reasons, and I will tell you, quite frankly, I was never a scout. But I got asked when I finally got back to the States after being gone for 7 out of the last 10 years, to be a member of the board of directors of the Sam Houston Council of the Scouts. And over 31 years in the Army, I'd served with a lot of scouts, a lot of great scouts. And it was amazing the dynamic that they brought to being military leaders. And when I got to Texas A&M, as Mr. McCarty mentioned, Bowen Lofton gave me one mission, and that was to grow the Corps. But he also told me you need to cut your budget. You cut your staff, cut your budget. Some things never change, doesn't matter where you are. So when I started looking at my programs, I'm the brand new Commandant, I said, okay, talk to me about this Aggie Eagle program. I want to know what this thing's all about, and we're spending all this money, what's our return on investment? We started looking at the numbers, and the thing that stuck out at me was they said, well, 95% of these Eagle Scouts stay in the Corps. I said, well, that's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy decision to make. We're keeping this program. And more importantly, we're going to go out and actively recruit more of these Eagle Scouts because there's something to them. They've got what I call it. For those of you that have served in the military, there's those leaders that had all the intangibles. You look at them, you say, wow, I'm not sure what it is he's got, but he's got it. And whatever that is, he's got it or she's got it. And so I'm honored to be here with you today to talk to you a little bit about what I think is probably the most important dynamic that Eagle Scouts bring, that Scouts bring, and that's leadership. And I'm in a business where leadership is paramount. And I happen to think that our country today is at a crossroads where we need leadership probably more than ever before. Good leadership. We need it now more than ever before. And I will tell you, quite frankly, we need scouts to stand up and become those leaders. I've seen them in the military. I know we've seen them in the government. We've seen them in business. We've seen them everywhere across our country. But we need scouts now more than ever, and we need leadership. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why that's important to all of us in today's environment. Can I get the first slide, please? Okay, next slide. Now, I oversee a Corps Cadets of 2,400 18 to 22-year-olds. So if you ever want to know what my job is like, think of 2,400 18 to 22-year-olds every day. There were days when being in combat was easier. But I tell them, I said, look, you know, what's important about being in the Corps Cadets as Texas A&M is we are developing you as leaders, leaders of character who can go out and lead in our communities, our state, and our nation. And it's still the number one thing employers are looking for in their employees today. They want young men and women that can come out and lead in their formations, whatever those formations may look like. So for me, leadership is probably the most important thing we talk about, leaders of character that can go out and lead effectively and lead well with the right morals and values that we all value in our society today. And so that's why this is important, and a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today. Next slide, please. Now, most people think that because I'm a general that I'm going to have some dead general's quote up there. That's not what I use. I use this quote by Franklin Field because I think it captures the essence of what good leadership is all about and what we're looking for in our young people today. But more importantly, what scouting imbues our young men and women with every day. And I call it the 4 No's. Not the 4 N-O's, but the 4 K-N-O-W's. Know yourself, know your people, know your job, and know your priorities. Knowing yourself, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, how to maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. Knowing your people. You know, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, knowing theirs as well. And being able to understand who are the guys I can give the mission to one time and they're going to get it done, who are the guys I got to prod a little bit, and then who are the guys I got to give a good, quick, swift kick in the butt every now and then to get the job done. Know your job. Being an expert at what you do, because your people notice if you know your job or you don't. Knowing their job as well. And in my business, it was imperative that you knew the job of the person over you. Because in my business, somebody could be gone in the blink of an eye, and now you've got to step up to fill that person's shoes. So being an expert at your job and the job of those that work for you and the job of those that you work for is imperative. And knowing your priorities, because on any given day, and you know this just as well as I do, there are 85 priorities for you to accomplish that day. And you can never get them all done in one day. And the best thing you can do for your people is prioritize for them and tell them, okay, if we do nothing else, we're going to get these 2 things, 3 things, 5 things, whatever it may be, we're going to get them done well. Now, I was a brigade commander at Fort Hood, Texas. I commanded 2,500 troops in the 1st Cavalry Division. And every Monday, I used to walk into my office, had a big whiteboard outside my office, and I would put the commander's top 5. I picked 5. Don't ask me why, but I picked 5. And I put down, these are the 5 things we're going to do this week. If we do nothing else, we're going to get these 5 things done this week. So anybody that walked by my office could see what my priorities were for that week. And of course, if you're smart, your priorities are aligned with your bosses. That helps a whole lot. But they knew. Now, my priorities changed every week. But the bottom line is prioritizing for your people is critical. Know yourself, know your people, know your job, know your priorities. That's leadership. And that last one there, keeping a cool head under stress, there's a person sitting in this room that hasn't had some kind of stress that you've had to deal with associated with your job. Whether it's, and also with your personal life. And I talk to these young people all the time about the fact that you're going to have to deal with stress. You're going to have to learn to do that if you're going to be an effective leader, because that's what's expected of leaders. You know, we talk about this in scouting all the time, and in a lot of the rigor that we put these young men and women through when they're out there going and earning their merit badges. But stress is going to be something that they're all going to have to deal with, and good leaders have got to learn how to do this extremely well. Next slide, please. Anybody know who this is? Sully Sullenberger, a Texas boy, by the way, born in Denison, Texas, graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1975, went on to fly F-4 Phantoms for the Air Force for 5 years, got out of the Air Force in 1980, and went to fly for U.S. Airways. And in January 2009, he was the pilot of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 that was leaving New York's LaGuardia Airport headed for Charlotte, North Carolina. And not long after takeoff, that plane hit a flock of birds, knocked out both engines, and that plane had no power. Now here's this man piloting this plane several thousand feet above the earth, 155 souls on board, and no power. Now, had that been Joe Ramirez, you would have heard, oh my God, we're all going to die. Where are the parachutes? How'd I get out of this thing? What did I sign up for? If you listen to the tower transmissions between the tower and Sully, the tower's saying, okay, we're going to divert you to heading 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll get you to this airport. You can make an emergency landing. We've got an emergency crew standing by. Sully comes back and literally in this tone of voice and says, I'm not going to be able to do that. I have no power. I'm not going to be able to divert this plane. I'm going to have to land this plane in the river. And that man takes that plane, maneuvers it, glides it, lands it in the Hudson River. The doors pop open. 155 people get off that plane. Sully walks up and down that plane twice to check to make sure that everybody got off before he did. That's leadership. That's keeping a cool head under stress. 155 people survived that incident because this man showed what good leadership was all about under probably one of the most difficult of circumstances. And so I'll ask you the same way I ask all the young people as they're getting ready to graduate, how are you going to respond when your Flight 1549 moment comes? Because it will come for every one of us. Every one of us is going to have that Flight 1549 moment. How are you going to respond? And my hope is, especially for those young people as they're getting ready to graduate, is that they'll all respond as well as this man did. That's leadership, and that's keeping a cool head under stress. Next slide, please. All right, golden rule of leadership. Now, I got to tell you, I graduated from Texas A&M in 1979. I graduated in the morning in G. Riley White Coliseum, which unfortunately is no longer there. We'll take a moment of silence. Graduated in the morning, and I commissioned that afternoon in the United States Army. My mom and dad, neither of whom had gone to college, were there to pin my gold bars on. My mom was on one side, and of course, she was crying because I was going in the Army. Her baby boy was going in the Army. My dad, who was an Army veteran, was pinning on my other gold bar, and he said, son, let me give you a piece of advice that I think will serve you well as a leader in the Army. And I said, what's that, Dad? He said, take care of your men, and your men will take care of you. Well, I never forgot that. That served me well for 31 years in the U.S. Army, whether I was commanding an 11-man platoon or a 12,000-man division. I never forgot what it meant to take care of your people, training them hard, preparing them for whatever situation they're going to face, making sure that when the bullets start flying, that my soldiers knew what they had to do, that they were fully prepared for the task at hand, but also looking out for their families, making sure that, you know, if I'm taking Specialist Ramirez halfway around the world to go fight, that his wife and 2 kids, and his wife who doesn't speak English, by the way, and 2 kids are at home and they're okay. They're going to be taken care of. Because as long as I've got that squared away, I've got an effective soldier downrange. Taking care of your people covers a lot of territory, but it's imperative to everything that we do as leaders. And that's what we teach scouts from the very beginning, looking out for others, taking care of the people that you work with, because if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. Next slide. This is a 4-man stack. This is in Baghdad in 2004. And these 4 men are about to enter a room in downtown Baghdad under some very violent conditions. And in that room are men that want to do them harm. And this is the kind of drill that we practice over and over and over again under the experienced, watchful eyes of our non-commissioned officers, our sergeants. We train this over and over again because we got to get this right. That lead man's going to kick down the door, and the following 3 guys are going to go in, and they're going to take down whoever's in there trying to do them harm. We have to do this right, or good soldiers die. Now, I want you to notice where everybody's pointed in this picture. And what's important is every member of this team has an assigned sector of fire. And if one person fails to cover their assigned sector of fire, they put the entire mission at risk, they put the entire team at risk, and good soldiers could die. And the moral here is, as leaders, you've got to develop the kind of team where every member of that team understands the importance and the criticality of the role they play in the success of your organization. It's no longer about them. It's no longer about you. It's about the organization and the role that everybody plays in making that organization successful. Good leaders build teams like this, where everybody understands that the role I play is important. And if I don't fulfill my role, then I put this organization and the success of the organization at risk. You take care of your people, and your people will take care of you. Next slide. Something else we'll have to deal with as leaders. You have to learn how to deal with adversity, because bad things are going to happen. And it's amazing. I talk to these young people who are getting ready to graduate, and I tell them, you know what? The best years of your life are ahead of you. Both personally and professionally, the best years of your life are ahead of you. But guess what? So are the worst days. The worst days of your life are ahead of you also. I'd love to be able to tell you that you're going to go out there and everything's going to be great, nothing bad's ever going to happen to you. I'd be lying through my teeth. You know, I grew up in inner city Houston, got a chance to go to Texas A&M, commissioned in the Army, became a general officer, the 4th Hispanic general officer in the Army at the time. And I can regale you for hours with the number of setbacks, disappointments, and failures I experienced in my career in achieving that. Everybody's got to learn how to deal with adversity, because your people expect you to be able to deal with that. They're going to look to you when times are the toughest. And if you can't do this, you will all struggle as an organization. Next slide. Now, I know you have none of these here in Amarillo. We have more than a few in Houston, I can tell you that. Potholes. And the reason I put this up here is my 1st battalion commander, I was a brand new lieutenant, and I was having my first office call with him, said, Joe, the road to success is full of potholes. And some of those potholes you'll see, and you'll be able to swerve and miss them. And some of those potholes you're not going to see, and you're going to hit them. And of the ones you hit, some will cause you to slow down a little bit. Some may even cause you to have to pull off to the side of the road to make some minor repairs. But what's important is you never let the potholes stop you from moving down your road to success. And the moral here is life is full of potholes. And you're going to hit some of those potholes along your road to success. But you can never let the potholes stop you completely. You know, I boxed in college, in high school. I was a Golden Gloves boxer. I'm a diehard Rocky fan, much to my wife's chagrin. I love Rocky. I've seen them all, Rocky 1 through 58. I've seen them all. And, you know, and in the last movie, Rocky Balboa, you know, his son is talking to him and lamenting the fact that he's a young business professional who's not progressing well, not moving up the ranks, not doing what he wants to do, and he's blaming it all on his dad. And Rocky looked at his son. He says, son, let me tell you something. Nothing is going to hit as hard as life. But it's not how hard you can hit. It's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How hard you can take the hits and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. And I love that analogy, because having been a boxer and having been hit pretty hard a few times, you know, nothing hits as hard as life. We're all going to get hit by life a few times on our road to success. But I always tell the cadets, getting knocked down is life. Getting back up and getting back into the fight is living. Don't ever let the potholes stop you on your road to success, because as leaders, your people expect you to be able to deal with those potholes and help get them through them as well. Next slide. My favorite quote from my favorite general. Positive attitude. You got to have a positive attitude. Now, let me tell you about what a combat multiplier is. In the Army, the basic combat element is the infantryman. He's the guy that we send out to close with and destroy the enemy. But to make him successful, we give him what we call combat multipliers. We give him intelligence. We give him tanks. We give him artillery. We give him close air support, attack helicopters, engineers. We give him all the stuff he needs to be successful. And we call those combat multipliers. Well, guess what? A positive attitude is a combat multiplier. How many of you have ever seen Winnie the Pooh? Every hand better go up, because every single one of you has seen Winnie the Pooh. I got 5 kids, so trust me, I've got that down cold. In Winnie the Pooh, there's a little donkey, walks around with these long floppy ears, a little black cloud hanging over him, and, you know, oh, well, it'll probably rain anyway. And his name is? Yeah, never seen Winnie the Pooh. Come on. Eeyore. Well, guess what? There are people out there just like Eeyore, and you know them. Oh, we're never going to make that deadline. We're all going to get fired. We're all going to die. You know, it's never going to work, you know. There are people like that, and people like that do not instill confidence and do not inspire you to follow them. A positive attitude makes all the difference. I deployed a battalion of artillery to Kuwait as a battalion commander, and we were right on the Iraqi border, way up there in northern Kuwait, right on the Iraqi border, and we're there, and I'm talking miles and miles of nothing but sand. 130 to 35 degrees every day, miles and miles of sand, nothing else. No Walmart, no 7-Eleven, no cold beverages, no girls. I mean, it was pretty bleak, pretty stark out there, and we're out there, and every day I'd walk my gun line and talk to my troops, because we trained at night because it was literally too hot during the day to train. But I would walk my gun line and talk to all my troops. How you doing? How things going at home? You know, et cetera, et cetera. And they'd always ask me, sir, how you doing? And my answer was always the same. It doesn't get any better than this. Well, after about 3 months out there in that desert, you know, and we were out there for 11 months total, but after about the 3rd month, walking that gun line got longer and longer and longer. And of course, you know, I'm talking to my troops, and they'd say, well, sir, how you doing? How's it going? It doesn't get any better than this. Well, after 3 months, they finally started to question my sanity, and they said, sir, come on. How can you say that? I mean, we're out here in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing to do. There's, you know, no girls, no beverages. I mean, how can you say that? I said, I'll tell you why I can say that. We are here because this is what the American people pay us to do. This is what we get paid to do. We are here now so that our families can live in peace and security back home. And better we're doing this here now than doing it on the streets of Boston or Kansas City or Houston or Los Angeles. We are doing exactly what we signed up to do and what the American people expect us to do. That's why it doesn't get any better than this. And when I left command, they gave me a statue, and it's in my office today, called the Commander. And at the bottom inscribed is, it doesn't get any better than this. A positive attitude makes all the difference, especially when times look the darkest. They don't want to follow Eeyore. They want to follow the person who's going to say, don't worry about it, guys. We'll be okay. We're going to get through this. We'll get through this together. But we're going to be okay. That's the kind of leader people want to follow. Never underestimate the power of a positive attitude. Next slide. And as a leader, somebody's always watching you. You are in the fishbowl whether you like it or not. Anybody heard of Brian Williams? There have been some great memes on the internet lately, I just got to tell you. In the military, we have an old saying that goes, the higher up the flagpole you go, the more your rear end shows. And it's true. You know, and as a leader, if people are always watching you, fair or unfair, right or wrong, it doesn't matter. People are always watching you as a leader. And you have to conduct yourself in a way that brings credit to you, who you are, and what you do and what you represent. Because it's not only your subordinates watching you, your peers watching you, your seniors watching you, it's also those that love you the most. Your family's watching you every day too. Don't ever do anything to let them down as a leader. Next slide. Now, this picture here is very special to me. That woman sitting there on the left is my grandmother. My grandmother grew up in San Benito, Texas. Had no education whatsoever. She raised 13 children. She was a housewife and a mother. That was my grandmother. That man sitting there on the right is my grandfather. He was a janitor at Rice University. Used to catch the bus from inner city Houston, where I grew up, over to Rice University, where he scrubbed toilets and swept floors. And my father, to this day, still has books in his home that my grandfather brought home from the Rice University library that they were getting rid of. They were old books. And he brought them home because he wanted his kids to read. He wanted them to develop a love of education. And that young man sitting next to my grandfather, that's my father. My father graduated from high school in Houston in 1950. And 3 days later, he joined the Army. Was going to get out of the inner city and go see the world. What happened in 1950? Korea. North Korea invades South Korea in June of 1950. Bad timing. In August of 1950, Private Joe Ramirez was fighting with the 1st Cavalry Division and the rest of the United Nations forces in Korea as they pushed the North Koreans completely out of South Korea, completely out of North Korea, and eventually pushed them all the way into China. And in November 1950, my father's outfit was sitting on the Yalu River, the boundary between North Korea and China, when the Chinese entered the war. And on 4 November 1950, 300,000 Chinese came across the border. They overran my father's outfit. His platoon got cut off. They tried to fight their way back to friendly lines. They got ambushed. He was shot 5 times and was taken prisoner of war by the Chinese. Spent the next 33 months as a prisoner of war in Manchuria, China, and was repatriated in 1953, weighing 70 pounds. 1,500 men died in that prison camp. And he went on to serve our country for 22 years, retiring in 1971 as an Army Master Sergeant. Now, I never forgot that in 31 years that I served in the Army. I never forgot where I came from and what I represented every day that I put this uniform on. And we in the military, we're famous for wearing a lot of bling on our uniforms, man. We wear ribbons and medals and badges and cords and all that. And don't get me wrong, I'm proud of what I wear because I earned them all. But I will tell you, I think the most important thing that I wear in my uniform every day is that name tag. Because that name tag is who I am. It's what I represent. It's the legacy that I carry forward from that right there. Not a single person in that picture graduated college. And my dad told me from the very beginning, you're going to college. And I am what I am today because of that picture right there. Every one of you has your own picture. Every single one of you has your own picture. And as a leader, you can never forget what you represent when you're out there leading, making decisions, influencing other people's lives. Don't ever forget what you represent, and don't ever let those that love you most down. Next slide. All right, this is a quote from a speech that Theodore Roosevelt gave to the graduating class of the U.S. Naval Academy in 1910. And I use it today with the cadets because I think it's as relevant today as it was back then. This is no longer a time for us to be producing merely good or average citizens. We need to be producing great citizens. We need to be developing scouts that are going to go on to become great citizens and great leaders. Why? Tough times for our country. We've been at war for 13 years. A war that has no end in sight, by the way. A war I participated in, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, and a war my son participated in with 3 combat deployments, 1 to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. We're just now coming out of the worst economic crisis our country has seen since the Great Depression of the 1930s. And politically, we're as divided a country as we've ever been. You're either far left or far right. You're either eating at Chick-fil-A or you're not eating at Chick-fil-A. I eat at Chick-fil-A, by the way. Tough times for our country. We need great leaders. And these young scouts we're talking about, that we're bringing up, that we're developing, we need them to be great citizens and great leaders for our country, in our communities, our state, and our nation. We need them now more than ever before. I spoke at 2 different high schools this morning, and I told those young people the exact same thing. You know, we are depending on you to be great citizens and great leaders for our country in the future. We need you. We need you now more than ever before. Next slide. Okay, my last slide. And I don't mean to be morbid, but one of these days, every one of us is going to have one of these over us. And when you look at a tombstone, you notice 2 things, the name and the dates. And every tombstone has 2 dates on it. And the first date is birth, the second day, death, exactly. So people look at a tombstone, they go, okay, guy's name is Ramirez. Let me see, let me do the math. He lived to be 179 years old. Obviously, I'm going to live to be 179. Obviously led a great life, and they move on. Everybody that looks at that tombstone always overlooks one little thing on that tombstone, and that's that line between those 2 dates that we call the dash. And why is that dash important? That dash represents every day, every week, every month, and every year of your life between that first date and that second date. That dash is your life. And I'll ask you the same way I asked our graduating cadets before they're getting ready to go out and take on the world, how are you going to live your dash? What are you going to do with your dash? One of these days, when they put one of these over you, what are people going to say about your dash? Because if they put one of these over Joe Ramirez tomorrow, Joe Ramirez can say unequivocally, I'm pretty happy with the way I live my dash. I grew up in the inner city, was a gangbanger, was in trouble with the law. My brother went to prison for 2.5 years, and I was right behind him. Despite the fact that I had parents that loved me and wanted better for me, I was doing everything wrong in my life. And I got the opportunity to go to Texas A&M, become a member of the Corps of Cadets, and my life changed completely after that. It was difficult, it was hard, but my life changed. I had no aspirations of joining the military. But at the end of my sophomore year, Army ROTC offered me a 2-year scholarship, offered to pay for my last 2 years of school, and I needed the money. My family struggled to pay for my first 2 years. But you know, I got so excited when they said scholarship, I missed the part about the 4-year commitment. That one just right by me. So when I finally figured out that I owed 4 years of my life to the Army once I graduated, I signed on the dotted line, and that was it. It changed my life forever. And I've had opportunities to do things and see things in this world that most people just read about in a book. And it all came about because I was given an opportunity. I was given an opportunity that a lot of others didn't get. And scouting is all about opportunity. An opportunity to develop young men and young women into leaders of character that we can depend on in the future, that we know will be prepared to handle whatever comes their way. Now I'm going to close with a quick story that I think will help bring this all together for you. Anytime a soldier dies in Iraq or Afghanistan, the Army assigns a general officer to preside over the funeral. When I became a general officer, I did 5 funerals for soldiers killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. Something you hate to do, but something you're honored to do. And the first one I did, I was the deputy commander for a guy by the name of Dave Petraeus, and I got a call saying, we need you to do a funeral. A young lieutenant killed in Karbala, Iraq, killed in action, and we're bringing him home, and we need you to preside over the funeral. I said, absolutely, honored to do so. And they send me all the details. This young man was a West Point graduate, an Eagle Scout, the oldest of 3 brothers. The other 2, the middle one was at West Point, a junior at West Point, another Eagle Scout. The youngest brother was in junior high. And his whole goal in life was to go to West Point like his brothers and be an Army officer. And I looked up where they lived. They lived in Verdon, Nebraska. Small town, heart of America, Verdon, Nebraska. And so I find out the date of the funeral, and I head to Verdon, Nebraska. It's January. It's 8 degrees outside, snow on the ground, I mean bitter cold. And I pull into this little small farming community of Verdon, Nebraska. And in the middle of town, there's an arena where they show cattle and horses. That's where they're going to do the memorial service. I walk in that arena. 500 people are in that arena to honor one of their own, including the governor, the lieutenant governor, and at the time, Senator Chuck Hagel. All there to honor this young man that paid the ultimate sacrifice. Family comes in. Mom and dad are my age. They sit down in the front row. Beautiful service. Unbelievable service for this young man. And at the end, I've got to present that young man's medals to the parents. And that was hard for me because at the time, I was the father of 2 soldiers. But I walk up there and I give them those medals. And I thank them for their son's service. And it was hard for me to get through that because as I looked at that mom and that dad, I just thought, I can't imagine what it must be like for them to be sitting through this right now. But I got through it, slipped out the side door because I've got to get out to the gravesite where we're going to do final military honors. Get in my sedan, freezing cold outside, 2 miles out to the gravesite, and we start driving out to the gravesite. All along the side of the road, on both sides of the road, are men, women, and children holding American flags, honoring one of their own. And I got to admit, I got choked up. And I told my driver, I said, you know, you won't see this on the 5 o'clock news, but you should. Because this is our country. This is what makes our country great, that regardless of your political affiliation, you're willing to come stand out here under these terrible conditions to honor a young man who paid the ultimate sacrifice for all of us. We get out to that grave site. Everybody comes out to the grave site. There's an honor guard there from the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We do the 21-gun salute. The bugler plays taps. They take that American flag off that young man's coffin. They fold it. The non-commissioned officer in charge hands me that flag. And my last official duty is I've got to hand that flag to that mother. And normally when you do that, you hand the flag and you say something along the lines of, on behalf of the President of the United States and a grateful nation, we present this flag to you in grateful thanks for your son's faithful service to our country. Something along those lines. I didn't do that. I got down on my knee in front of that mother. I handed her that flag. And I said, ma'am, I know there's nothing I can say right now that can assuage the loss you must feel. But I hope you know how grateful we are as a nation for the sacrifice your family's made for all of us. And that when you see this flag, you'll remember what a fine young man you raised and how we as a nation will always be grateful to him for the sacrifice he has made for all of us. And that mother at that moment, a moment I can't even imagine as a father, looked at me and said, General, thank you and all of our soldiers for what you do for our country every day. And don't you worry, I'm going to keep sending you my sons. Well, rule number one for a general is generals don't cry. Well, I had a bad case of allergies that day. It may have been 8 degrees outside, but there was something kicking up somewhere. I had to get up and walk away. I mean, those words affected me they haunted me for years. Well, fast forward to 4 years ago. I'm the Commandant of Cadets at Texas A&M University, about to welcome in, a whole new class of brand new freshmen, and I'm standing there meeting all these new freshmen as they're coming in, ready to join the Corps, and I'm talking to them, and up walks this big strapping young man. I said, how you doing there, young man? He said, I'm doing great, sir. I said, what's your name? He tells me his name. I said, where are you from? Verdon, Nebraska. And I looked at him. I said, where'd you say you were from? Verdon, Nebraska, sir. And I was about to ask him what his name was when there to his right is that mother. Bad case of allergies that day, too. I just got to tell you, I grabbed that woman and we hugged and we cried and we talked about that day. And when I finally had composed myself, I looked at her. I said, why are you here? She said, General, I never forgot what you told me and told our family that day. I never forgot that. And when I found out you were here at Texas A&M, I wanted to bring my son down here to have him be a part of what you have to offer as a leader. Well, I looked at that young man. I said, let me tell you something, young man. If we bring in 800 freshmen into the Corps and 799 of them quit, you ain't going to be one of them. I said, I will chase you to Verdon, Nebraska and drag your ass back down here so fast. That young man graduates this May. And believe it or not, he's commissioning in the United States Army. Not that this Army general had anything to do with that, but he's commissioning in the U.S. Army in May into the field artillery, the same branch as his older brother. And that mother has been my guest at least one football game, if not two, over the last 4 years. I brought her down, we put her up, and we've taken her to football games. Now, the reason I tell you that is because you should never underestimate the impact you can have on someone else's life as a leader. A kind word, a kind gesture, a pat on the back to say you done good, a handshake to say thank you, cards or letters when they or a family member is in the hospital. Spending time, quality time with those young scouts and encouraging them to continue on that great path to become great citizens and great leaders. You take care of your people, and your people will take care of you. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. God bless all of you and what you do every day. God bless the great state of Texas, and God bless America. Thank you very much.